door closes. Another one opens. Another one opens.
So let's talk Tarot. This is a horror movie that stars Jacob Batalon, who is from the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland. And this tells the story of a group of college friends who have rented out this kind of Airbnb mansion for one of their birthdays. And they decide to go exploring in the mansion. There is a room which is locked and has a kind of private notice on. But because they're abrasive young adults, they decide that they want to break in and have a look. And among other things, they find a wooden box containing some very old tarot cards. Now, one of the group is familiar with tarot cards and decides to give everyone a kind of reading. And we find out that these particular set of tarot cards are actually cursed, and everyone now dies or is cursed to die in the manner of the horoscope or the reading kind of describes. So someone gets in the reading, for example, they're crushed by burden or something, and then they get obviously crushed. So what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works in this movie. Now, this is a studio movie rather than an independent picture, and this comes with positives and negatives. If you were to do a Wikipedia entry for a example of a studio mandated horror movie, I'm not surprised if you would see a picture of this movie. Now, it's a mixed bag because of that, but let's talk about the positive sides of that first of all. Now, this being a studio flick, it's quite polished. If you are wanting a nice looking movie in regards to production and kind of design, sound design, editing, things like this, it kind of looks very crisp, very kind of polished. I would probably best describe this movie for fans of who aren't really interested in horror necessarily, or already have a very casual interest. If you're a movie fan who only watches the occasional movie, or you don't watch much horror and occasionally you kind of dabble, I think this movie would be the perfect one for you, because it's all very well made, but it's kind of, well, we'll come on to what doesn't work, but it's very accessible, I would say, for audiences who maybe don't watch much in the way of these kind of movies. It has a very diverse cast, so it's got, it's representing various kind of demographics. There's lots of kind of attractive young people. There's kind of, a kind of ticking clock in regards to the kind of, they've got to find a solution to this before sort of time runs out. There's a variety of themed kind of attacks and deaths, each one relating to the various readings, and it kind of plays a little bit like Final Destination in regards to that. These young people, have their life threatened in kind of a variety of different manners, which gives it a little bit of variety. One thing I did like is there is a kind of central protagonist. This protagonist changes form dependent on the tarot card that was kind of the main card and things like this. So we get a variety of different of antagonists, albeit it's the same antagonist, it just kind of appears differently to each person. But it does mean we get some kind of variety in regards to that. It's not overly gory. There are some death scenes which seem like they'd be quite horrific, but it's kind of more suggested rather than kind of shown on screen. Again, so it probably would appeal to those people more casually into horror, or like an entry-level kind of horror film and kind of things like that. I don't think the acting is bad at all, to be fair. I think the characters are a little basic, but the acting isn't bad. I'll give the kind of the cast that. And, you know, it's like I've said, it's all got bells and whistles in regards to, I think, some of the production design and just the flourishes that make it look a nice, pretty movie. But let's talk about what doesn't work, and let's talk about now if you're more of a ardent horror fan, or if you've watched more than a few, because as I've said, this is like a studio mandated horror film, and it feels like it's churned out by a factory, because everything about this movie is just cliched, and everything that you've seen before many times just regurgitated and kind of slapped with a kind of a new label on it called tarot. Let me go into a little bit more detail. So it's, you know, again, we have this ethnically diverse kind of cast, and it's like, it's very much by studio committee. Everyone's represented, and I know that can be a positive thing in some regards, but it just seems like it's a studio mandated thing. Representation because they want to hit diversity demographics rather than it being a natural kind of like the way this kind of story shakes out. It goes into lots of cliched types of attacks. I've mentioned in many videos how we always get that kind of like scene where we have someone who's kind of looking maybe towards the camera, and then we'll see like a figure behind them, and then they turn around and the figure's gone, and it's like, well, who is that figure appearing for? Because if it's manifesting so it's visible, but the character's not even looking at it, but then they turn and it's now invisible again, who is it? Who is this bloody figure appearing for? It doesn't make sense. And this movie does it more than once. But a lot of these movies do that, so let's not hold it against it. But that's just one of these kind of things, you know, that you've seen a lot of these type of like churn them out sort of horror films. I think the idea of the tarots being the literal way that these characters are killed, it seems like an easy way to do it, to be honest with you. You know, the way these kind of fortunes are sort of read out, and there'll be something that is the literal representation of that ends up killing them. It's not really about the kind of the path that these characters are going on and decisions that they're making. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, you know, we mentioned this guy, you know, this guy's feels closed in, so we'll have him in an enclosed space and things like this. It doesn't really seem like particularly imaginative or clever. It's just taken the easiest way to kind of theme it to a tarot, if that makes sense. The entity to me seems a little bit too powerful. It seems to be able to warp reality to do whatever the movie kind of wants us to do, or wants to do, you know, so it just seems to be a little bit too powerful, if you ask my opinion, because it just seems to be able to do whatever the script wants. The characters that I've mentioned, you know, don't get much in the way of kind of characterization. They're quite sort of shallow. We get the typical our main sort of character, you know, she just happens to be into tarot because she was trying, she had her mum died of cancer and that was the way she was dealing with it. Very sort of typical things like that. Now I'm not very well versed in tarot cards and things like this, so what I am about to say now, I could be wrong, but to me, there's without kind of giving away spoilers, we have a plot point here where they use doing the tarot cards and someone as a plot point to further the story. Now to me, I always was under the impression that someone had to pick their own cards for it to be about them, if that makes sense. But in the movie we have a sequence where someone picks cards about someone else, and then that somehow relates to the other person when they've had absolutely no impact or no interaction with the card. So for example, if I were to if I wanted to do a reading on you, I would have thought you would have had to pick out the various cards or make decisions to therefore for me be able to read them. But instead, I'm reading cards without you doing anything again. Well, that's your future. I've done everything. I put the cards out. I've read them. You know, I'm just telling you that this is your fate. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know if, not that I know much about tarot cards, but to me, I thought if it's about it's about someone, surely they would have to be a participant in their own reading. Otherwise, you could just do a tarot card about literally anyone, and just go, yeah, I've done these cards, and that's about the person A who lives in 10 houses down, and it doesn't make sense to me. Not that I, am well into that sort of stuff, but there you go. So to me, it just seemed like this movie is called Tarot, and I don't think it didn't have that much connection to the actual art of doing tarot cards, or the actual, the practice of it and what it actually means. And had just taken the kind of the lazy way to kind of like, let's just have an excuse to have a variety of themed deaths, basically. I thought the ending, I was like, surely that's not the ending, but it is. Okay. So, yeah, it's like I said, it's like a very pretty film in regards to its production, and I think I like the variety and kind of monsters and things. But it's really, I think, quite dumb, to be honest with you, and super generic. It's super generic. But if you're not a big horror fan, I think maybe this is a movie that some of the masses could enjoy. But if you've watched probably more than like 10 films that I've reviewed on this channel, you're probably not gonna think it's much cop. I'll give it a 5 out of 10 because I do feel that it is okay for a particular audience, and I don't think it's necessarily a badly made film. It's just very lazy and very generic and doesn't really have a voice. But I'll give it an average score because I think the for an entertainment value, it's acceptable. Have you seen it? What your thoughts are? Please leave me a comment, and I look forward to seeing you next time.